Over the last 48 hours, the exchange of drones and missiles in the Middle East has proven exactly how fragile the current interim diplomatic agreements actually are. The economic reaction is immediate. This line chart tracks global market stability following the strikes, plunging downward as traders react to the sudden influx of kinetic violence in the region. And that macroeconomic panic instantly trickles down to your local gas station. Even the smallest spark overseas translates into prices jumping to $6.89 a gallon before you even realize a conflict has occurred. The recent violence demonstrates that the existing, paper-thin diplomatic deals offer everyday global consumers absolutely no shield against localized military actions. To understand why a local incident triggers a global shock, we have to look at the geography. This map isolates the narrow physical dimensions of the Strait of Hormuz, the primary bottleneck for a massive portion of the world's energy supply chain. Because the navigable channels are so tight, massive commercial vessels are forced into a single-file formation, leaving them highly exposed and restricting their ability to maneuver. Regional actors understand this severe physical vulnerability. By applying targeted pressure to this specific waterway, they can weaponize the geography, ensuring that even a minor disruption throttles the massive flow of global oil. This lack of physical security gives Iran outsized leverage on the world stage, forcing international players to intervene diplomatically to keep the oil moving. That forced intervention brings us away from the kinetic violence and into the quiet, tense meeting rooms of Doha. But the peace talks face an immediate structural roadblock. Tehran refuses to communicate face-to-face with the U.S. delegation. This structural flowchart shows the mechanical workaround keeping the negotiations alive. Communication is strictly indirect, relying entirely on Qatari mediators to physically shuttle messages back and forth between separate, isolated rooms. Trying to resolve highly complex, heavily armed conflicts through an international game of telephone is an incredibly slow and fragile process. Every detail has to be relayed, interpreted, and passed back. By severely handicapping the negotiators with this convoluted setup, the talks devolve into short-term crisis management rather than the construction of a sustainable peace agreement. This split-screen ledger tracks opposing mandates. Iran's primary demand is securing the release of frozen assets. On the other side, the U.S. is focused heavily on securing free-flowing maritime traffic, while demanding strict limits on nuclear enrichment capabilities, heavily stacking their side of the ledger. You have a demand for direct financial relief, competing against demands for broad military and nuclear concessions. They are completely different categories of leverage, meaning they cannot simply be traded one for one across a table. Because these core demands remain entirely incompatible, the talks in Doha can only produce a temporary stopgap agreement. The root causes of the conflict remain completely untouched. To understand where this is heading, look at this circular flowchart. A geopolitical spark directly causes a market shock, sending oil prices up, forcing a hasty diplomatic band-aid. Because demands remain unbalanced, peace degrades, leading right back to a new spark. Experts identify this repeating escalation pattern as the predictable output of a broken diplomatic framework. Until both powers find a sustainable middle ground, any minor disruption in the Strait of Hormuz will trigger this cycle all over again. The constant threat of regional escalation has become the permanent status quo, leaving the global energy supply perpetually trapped in an infinite feedback loop.